Okay, today's date is, do you know what today's date is?
18.
The 18th, Friday, January 18th, 2013. This is Joshua Rice. I'm here with my Nana, Mary Lou Betts, for a life interview. Nana, if you could begin by just telling us where, when, and where you were born.
Okay. I was born Mary Lucille, I think, Fairman. It was either Mary Lucille or Mary Louise, one of the two. My mother's name was Lucille. But I was born in Chicago, Illinois at Ravenswood Hospital on March 10th, 1935. And I was born to Lucille Phelan Fairman and Merle Delmar Fairman. My father was from Lafayette, Indiana, a pharmacy graduate from Purdue of class of 1912. And that's how they met. My mother was a cosmetologist, and they met at the Union Station in Chicago. And so they married. My mother had been married before. Her husband left her with a son to take care of, who was my brother. And we were 16 months apart. He passed away in 92.
What was life like growing up for you in Chicago?
From what I remember, it was fun. I had friends that lived down the street, and we played together. There was no computer. There was no television. Hard to believe for you. And we would just play hopscotch, and a friend of mine and I tried every year to build a lemonade stand and sell lemonade. And one of the things I remember, I must have been quite young, was we would get several blankets and drape them over my dining room table, and that was our house underneath the table. And I don't know what we did, but we had fun. And we played a lot of board games, Sorry, Monopoly, Parcheesi. Those are the ones that I remember. And in the wintertime in Chicago, we loved to, this was when I was a little bit older, play out in the snow, make angels in the snow. And near where I lived when I was 5th grade until I moved to California, they would flood the park near where I lived, a section of the park, and it would freeze, and we would go ice skating over there. So that was a lot of fun. And they had lights at night, so we'd skate at night. So that was our entertainment.
That's fun. Where did you, what were all the schools you went to, grade school and high school?
I'm not really sure of where I went when my parents moved around a fair amount. My dad liked to, well, I don't know why they moved around, but later on, he liked to buy homes that needed fixing up, and he'd fix them up and then sell them at a profit, and then we would move, not too frequently, but after several years. But we lived in apartments in Chicago, and what I did was I went to, I know we lived on Hoyne Avenue in Chicago, and I'm not sure what, I went through Catholic school all through high school and my first 2 years in college. So I know there was a St. Juliana's. I graduated from 8th grade there, and that was on the northwest side in Edison Park in Chicago. And then I went to St. Scholastica's High School, which was a distance. I had to take bus and transfer, etc. But I loved it. It was great. And that's where I met my good friend Greta. And we only knew each other 2 years, but we still communicate after all these years. And then from St. Scholastica's, when I was in my junior year in high school, my father was tired of the weather. It wasn't good for his health. So we moved to California, and he had relatives here, a couple of sisters in California, nieces, nephews. And so we moved here, and I went to Mater Dei High School in Santa Ana. And I happened to have come at a time when we were ended up being the first graduating class.
Ooh.
And then
What year was that?
1953.
Okay.
We're about to have, this is 13, we are about to have our 60th high school reunion. That does a number on my heart, but whatever. From there, I went to Immaculate Heart College in Hollywood, which is no longer in existence, and that was a wonderful experience for me. I had great fun, made great friends. And then because by that time I decided I wanted to major in speech communications, they really didn't have much there, so I transferred to Cal State Long Beach.
And what year did you transfer? Junior year?
It would have been 55.
Okay.
Would have been 55, and I graduated from there, and then started teaching speech and history at Mater Dei. I went back to Mater Dei High School, and that's when I met your grandfather.
Wow.
In that time frame.
What was he doing at that time?
Well, he as you know, was born and raised in Ireland, and he went to the University of Cork and got his medical degree. And he actually was waiting to be sent or have an opening in Liverpool, England. But that didn't seem to materialize, and so he had two brothers over here. And actually, I think he had three at that time. He had three brothers and a sister who remained in Ireland. But the three brothers, I believe, were out here before him, and one was a doctor and said, why don't you come out here? So that's what he did. And he interned at St. Mary's Hospital in Long Beach, and then was doing what they call locum tenens, which is relieving a physician who may be taking a sabbatical or going on vacation. And he just had opened his office in Westminster, which was right across. It wasn't then, but now it's Westminster Mall, and it was right across from there. And he had belonged to a group called Single Catholics Over 21, Scots Club. And these were all, I think they were all college graduates. And so a friend of his that he had met through there, I was dating a bit, and this George had called me to go out, and I said, well, I promised a friend of mine that I would go to Mater Dei's first football game. She graduated from Oregon State, I believe, whatever one is in Corvallis, and she came back and was working for the gas company. So I told George I have Helen, and he said, well, what if I get somebody for Helen? And I said, well, I'll have to ask her. She's engaged, but her fiancé is still in Oregon working on his master's. So Helen said, it'll be the four of us, we're just going to a football game. So the blind date was my husband-to-be. So that's how we met. So after that, he asked me out, and that was September, and we were engaged in December and married in March.
What year?
Not March, excuse me, June. 1958.
That's when you married, 1958?
That's when we got married, in 1958.
What do you remember of that first impression of meeting Rudy?
I'll never forget it. The apartments are still there right next door to St. Joseph's Catholic Church in Santa Ana, which is where we were married. And went back there with some of my children when it would have been Rudy's and my 50th wedding anniversary. We went back there to Mass. And I looked at the apartments right next door because my friend Helen had rented an apartment there. In fact, she wanted me to move in with her, but as a teacher, I couldn't afford it. She was working for the gas company, making buku bucks at that time. But anyway, I went over to her apartment, and George and Rudy came to the apartment. And what I remember of him was, it was during the time that they had big shoulder pads in their sport coats, and he had a sport coat on with these big shoulders, and he was heavier. He weighed about 175 pounds at that time, and he was 5'8", 5'9". And he wasn't fat, but he was just a little heavier. And his brogue is what did me in. And he loved to dance, and I loved to dance, so.
There you go.
And besides, he brought me flowers all the time, so how could I ever say no?
Oh, perfect. And how long were you engaged for?
We were engaged 6 months.
Awesome.
But that seems like such a short time, but I think both of us had dated before. I almost had gotten engaged before. He had. And he was starting his practice, and I had my schooling behind me, and the timing was right. And so why wait?
And when you married, that was, I know, so you got your bachelor's in communications, then you got your master's degree?
I went
Was that?
back to, well, actually, before I got married, I had started on my master's in speech communications. And Rudy was so insistent. He was very pro education. And he said, "You just go back and finish it." And I said, "Well, because I had your Aunt Sharon right away, I got pregnant right away. And so I said, well, you know, you're going to have to babysit and I'll take evening classes. And that was fine with him. And so I got my master's from Cal State Long Beach in 19... Michael was born in 1963, so I got it right shortly after he was born. He was in August, and I think maybe the following spring is when I completed it. They gave you 5 years under a program, and if you didn't complete all your units of 5 years, then you had to go under the new program, which might have meant additional classes, etc.
Yeah.
So
Where was your first house at with Rudy?
he bought a home for, I think it was $8,000, a 3-bedroom, huge lot in Westminster. And so we lived there for about, we were married in June, and we lived there until, I believe it was, we lived there about a year and a half. And then we bought a home in Garden Grove in 1960. And that was off of Magnolia and Orangewood on Bowles Avenue. And it wasn't, we lived there for 6 years until I was pregnant with Eileen, and we felt we needed a little bit bigger house. And so I saw some new homes as I was heading to the mall off of Orange and Brookhurst in Anaheim. And so we debated, could we afford $42,000 for this home? And we decided, well, we'll just make it work. And so we did. And so we lived there for 30 years.
There you go.